Assalamu alaikum, this is Shania Fatma and my registration number is L1F18BSCN0107. Today I'm gonna presenting the themes of 20th century novel. There are so many themes in 20th century novel like alienation, gender sexuality, absurdity and isolation. And I'm gonna present on isolation, and the novel I've chosen is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. And the theme of isolation is very prominent in Mrs. Dalloway. So I'm gonna present on the theme of isolation. So let's begin with the summary of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Mrs. Dalloway covers one day from morning to night in one woman's life. Clarissa Dalloway, an upper-class housewife, walks through her London neighborhood to prepare for the party she will host that evening. When she returns from flower shop, an old suitor and friend, Peter Wash, drops by her house unexpectedly. The two have always judged each other harshly, and their meeting in the present intertwines with their thoughts of the past. Years earlier, Clarissa refused Peter's marriage proposal, and Peter has never quite gotten over it. Peter asks Clarissa if she is happy with her husband Richard, but before she can answer, her daughter Elizabeth enters the room. Peter leaves and goes to the Regent's Park. He thinks about Clarissa's refusal, which still obsesses him. The point of view then shifts to Septimus, a veteran of World War I who was injured in trench warfare and now suffers from shell shock. Septimus and his Italian wife Lucrezia pass time in Regent's Park. They are waiting for Septimus's appointment with Sir William Bradshaw, a celebrated psychiatrist. Before the war, Septimus was a budding young poet and lover of Shakespeare. When the war broke out, he enlisted immediately for romantic, patriotic reasons. He became numb to the horrors of war and its aftermath. When his friend Evans died, he felt little sadness. Now Septimus sees nothing of worth in the England he fought for, and he has lost the desire to preserve either his society or himself. He believes his lack of feeling in a crime clearly. Septimus's experience in the war have permanently scared him, and he has serious mental problems. However, Sir William does not listen to what Septimus says and diagnoses a lack of proportion. Sir William plans to separate Septimus from Lucrezia and sends him to a mental institution in the country. Richard Dalloway eats lunch with Hugh Whitebread and Lady Bruton, members of High Society. The man helped Lady Bruton write a letter to the Times, London's largest newspaper. After lunch, Richard returns to home with a large bunch of roses for Clarissa. He intends to tell her that he loves her, but finds that he cannot because it has been so long since he last said it. Clarissa considers the void that exists between people, even between husband and wife. Even though she values the privacy she is able to maintain in her marriage, considering it vital to the success of the relationship. At the same time, she finds slightly disturbing the fact that Richard doesn't know everything about her. Clarissa sees of Elizabeth and history teacher Miss Gilman, who are going shopping. The two elder women despise one another passionately, each believing the other to be an oppressive force over Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Septimus and Lucrezia are in their apartment, enjoying a moment of happiness together before the man comes to take Septimus to the asylum. One of the Septimus doctors, Dr. Holmes, arrives. The Septimus fears the doctor will destroy his soul In order to avoid this fate, he jumps from a window to his death. Peter hears the ambulance go by to pick up Septimus's body and marvels ironically at the level of London civilization. He goes to Clarissa's party, where the most of the novel major characters are assembled. Clarissa works hard to make her party a success but feels dissatisfied by her own role and acutely conscious of Peter's critical eye. All the party goers, but especially Peter and Sally Seton, have to some degree failed to accomplish two dreams their youth. Though the social order is undoubtedly changing, Elizabeth and the member of her generation will probably repeat the errors of Clarissa's generation. Sir William Bradshaw arrives late, and his wife explains that one of his patients, the young veteran Septimus, has committed suicide. Clarissa retreats the privacy of a small room to consider Septimus' death. She understands that he was Septimus, admiring him for having taken a pledge and for not compromising his soul. She feels with her comfortable position as a society hostess responsible for his death. The party nears its close as guests begin to leave. Clarissa enters the room and her presence fills Peter with great excitement. The detachment and outsideness that characters feel throughout the novel brings deep feeling of fear that the entire world is against them. Woolf uses the structure of the post-World War I societal, the political environment to create the problems, interactions, feelings, and behaviors that characters in the novel face and represent. So, how this theme of isolation affecting the novel of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf? I'm gonna elaborate this. Just about every character in Mrs. Dalloway feels isolated in some way. Although many of them are bound by tradition, class, history, love of empire, or survival of trauma, they feel very alone in the world. Woolf uses metaphors of thread and fish swimming in water to indicate how loose the connection between people are. People see each other as object, not as subject. They think about others but don't necessarily communicate with them. Even though they are desperate to, characters seem to lack the right language to have meaningful exchanges. Clarissa's husband, who loves her very much, finds himself incapable of even saying "I love you" and must use flower to send the message. Clarissa parties aim to bring the people together, but to really become gathering of a bunch of isolated individuals. The isolation that people feel throughout Mrs. Dalloway brings with it deep feelings of fear that the entire world is against them. In the end, Clarissa feels more of a connection to Septimus and the old lady across the way than to anyone else. So, the discussion of the theme of isolation is the end. So, in the end, I must say thank you to all for listening my presentation.